Hello, everyone. Welcome to Roller Coaster of Running. I am, of course, your host, Andy, and I'm here today just to do a very quick introduction to the interview I recently did with the brilliant minds behind the Rise and Run podcast. I was joined by Bob and Greg, and those guys talk a little bit more about runDisney, what you can expect, their favorite moments, their favorite events, but they also go into a bit of detail as well about how they got the podcast started, how that developed out, and how it has created this awesome community of fans and listeners who all love runDisney, all love running. They have some fantastic guests on there. They have a lot of information and advice from people that are very close to those events as well. So if you are wanting to learn a little bit more, or if you're a fan of the podcast already, then this is a great interview for you guys to watch. It's about an hour long, and it's a great time to have a chat with them as well, especially heading into a week and a couple of days away from the Expo for Wine and Dine Festival that's coming up very, very soon. So I hope you enjoy the interview. Let me know if you enjoyed it. Are you going to start listening to the podcast? And I really hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed speaking to them as well. So have an awesome time, guys, and I'll see you on the next one. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Roller Coaster of Running. I am joined by Bob and Greg from the Rise and Run podcast. I'm really excited to have a chance to talk to these guys about everything runDisney and everything Rise and Run as well, because it's a podcast that I've been listening to a lot over the last few months, and we'll kind of get into some of the stuff you might hear on the podcast. But just a chance to, first of all, hi, guys. How are you both doing?
Andy, great to see you, man. Thanks for inviting us. Right off, I have to admit, I'm used to podcasting, not YouTubing. So I heard a noise. I looked over this way and I go, wait a minute, this is video. I can't do that.
No worries. How are you doing, Greg?
I'm doing swell. Thank you so much for having us. We really, really appreciate it.
No, the pleasure is absolutely all mine to have you both on. As I said, I have been listening to you guys, I think, since probably about episode 70 or so.
Okay.
And I was really excited. It wasn't too long ago for anyone watching this who isn't kind of up to date with Rise and Run and haven't heard of them before. They recently overtook 100 episodes, which is a big deal for you. Research seems to suggest that you've been going since, is it like the back end of 2021? Is that right?
October 22nd, 2021, episode 1.
So was there any reason why you thought, I've got a really burning desire that we must start a podcast for runners, and in particular Disney running as well?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. That's exactly what it was. I like when I go out to run, I like listening to podcasts. And I love running at Disney. So I'm looking for podcasts about running at Disney, and there aren't any. I mean, there are plenty of running podcasts, plenty of Disney podcasts, some that cross over once in a while, but not one where I could tune in and be sure I was going to hear about running at Disney. So I got this group of folks together, and by golly, we filled that void.
And the thing is, a couple of years ago, I mean, I want to say this was early on in my runDisney journey. There actually were a couple.
Yeah, there were.
You had the Mickey Miles and More podcast. Mm-hmm. You had the Let's Run Disney podcast and everything like that. But unfortunately, even before the pandemic hit, those kind of faded away a little bit. Now, I thought I saw a rumor on Twitter that the Mickey Milers are coming back. So very, very excited for that. But no, Bob's absolutely right. There was lots of running podcasts, lots of Disney podcasts, but not a lot that intersected the two on a regular basis.
So you've kind of grown then in, there's now a number of you who are kind of presenters each week, and then some kind of come and go because they obviously have events or just life things on at the time. So right. How did that group grow? Like, who did you kind of think that person would be really good for the podcast, or was it just a very natural thing of, hey, would you like to be invited, or what does that look like?
That's a great question. And it evolved. The podcast itself evolved out of a couple of Zoom calls, really. Facebook groups first and then Zoom calls. And we made friends on Facebook. Greg was the first person I actually met in person, but I let him share that. But after a while, when we come up with the idea, I kind of looked and said, all right, who has been really active with us in Zoom? Who have we become friends with? And so I was a friend with Alicia early on. Alicia started a Facebook group. She actually started 2. They had some success and they grew. And so I knew her. I'll let Greg tell the story. The rest came from Zoom calls. The Facebook group got big enough and we said, let's have a Zoom call every other week. And the folks who showed up regularly and were active, Jack, Lexi, they're best friends. Greg was already a friend, and John was already a friend. That formed the nucleus of the group. The other interesting one that joined us is Allie, and she's been a tremendous addition to the podcast, but she was not a part of the original 6. I met Allie at, it must have been Marathon Weekend a couple years ago, back when she still had blue hair. And so she was memorable. We needed some folks because that particular year, none of the members of the gang had run the Princess Run, and we wanted to recap it. So we invited 2 friends, Allie and Pamela, who joined us. And Allie just fit in as a natural. And the other women in the group are younger. Well, everybody's younger than me. Okay. But, and they actually have these things they call lives. So they're not always available at 8 p.m. Tuesday night. And I thought, we got room for one more person here. And most of the time, it's very rare that all 7 of us are there. So Allie came along and she's been a wonderful addition. But I'll let Greg tell you how he and I became friends.
Yeah, so it was back in the summer of 2016, and I was running a race called the Phil's Tavern Quarter of a Marathon.
Mm-hmm.
And what I loved about it is that the tagline was, because 10K is just not enough.
Yeah, right.
Because, so I think it comes out like 6 and 6/10 or something like that.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was training for my first ever runDisney race, which was the 2016 Wine and Dine half marathon weekend. And at the time, Disney actually used to sell shirts that said, "I'm training for such and such race." So I do this race with my one college roommate, and I was really excited to do it because it was out at a satellite campus of my alma mater of Temple University. And all of a sudden, I'm walking around and I go inside to use the restroom, and I see this rather tall gentleman also waiting for the restroom. And he just stares me down and he says to me, "I'll see you there." And I'm like, "Where?" And then all of a sudden I look down at my shirt and I realize, okay, that's why. So we part ways. Bob and I run the race. I'm finishing up. I'm a back of the packer, so I'm coming in much later after my college roommate. And the thing is, I'm expecting him to be the one waiting for me, and he wasn't. He was kibitzing with other people.
He was out of there.
The person who waited for me at the finish line was Bob. And Bob was the one who told me about Alicia's Facebook groups.
Mm-hmm.
And, we both started talking about Wine and Dine. And it was in that moment we started our beautiful friendship that we have. Now, in relation to the podcast, I think Bob has ulterior motives. I mean, sure, I was active in the Facebook groups. I was active on the Zoom calls. But Bob also knew that I had some audio and video editing chops. And he's like, if I'm going to do this podcast, I'm going to need somebody to put it together for me in post-production. I'm just kidding.
Well, you're actually giving me credit that's not due to me, because I knew you worked in the field, but I had no idea that you did this specifically. And you were great at it. I do think about it. I think, so that morning Greg gets up and he goes to his closet and he goes, not this shirt. I'm wearing another one. Does any of this ever happen?
Correct. Exactly.
Who knows?
So as you've kind of grown, what I can only explain as a community of listeners, what's been your biggest sense of accomplishment? What's given you the biggest sense of accomplishment since you've done the start of the podcast? What have you said, that's my favorite thing we've done since we've been doing this whole Rise and Run podcast?
You want to start, Greg?
Sure. To me, it's the sense of fostering a community. Sure, I've created a lot of personal memories for myself, for my family, it's awesome now to be able to go down to, Walt Disney World multiple times to, see my extended family and everything like that. We've met some really wonderful people in terms of the guests and everything like that. But really what it boils down to, the biggest memories for me is how our community has grown and shown support to one another. And it's one of those things where, I know this is going to sound really, really corny, but when I was in high school, one of the, many career paths that I thought I was going to take was, I thought, I would love to be a motivational speaker one day. But the problem is, all these student leadership conferences that I went to, everybody had, this, story or, a tragic event that, really turned around their lives. And like, I looked at myself and I'm like, well, I don't really have that. So clearly, this isn't a field for me to get into. And then we start the podcast. And again, we're doing this as, for fun and, hoping to, maybe positively, inspire that first time runner or that first time Run Disney participant or something like that. And where it really hit home for me was Wine and Dine 2022, so last year's race.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was standing in line for a pre-race character photo. And I ended up striking up a conversation with somebody in line. And all of a sudden, the person who was like in the switchback on the other side recognized my voice. And it was that first interaction where she just looked me dead in the eye and was like, your story about crossing the finish line of your first ever marathon and your first ever Goofy challenge brought me to tears and inspired me to keep going in my training. And that, the wave of emotion that just came over me in that sense it was really, really profound. And I will always hold on to that moment for the rest of my life. And it's one of those things where, sure, it's a lot of preparation that goes into making this podcast and editing it and promoting it and everything like that. And sure, it takes a lot of time, it takes a little bit of money too and stuff like that. But to me, the fact that I know that I have personally impacted at least one runner's life is payment enough for me. And I can die a happy man knowing that I instilled positive change. And the fact that the more and more people that we are getting in our Rise and Run community to be able to foster those feelings and support one another as well, it is the most, it's such a positive, overwhelming feeling because we need more positive stories in our world today. And the fact that we can create that and others can create that for each other is just a truly awesome feeling.
You can die a happy man, Greg, just not anytime soon, okay?
Oh, yes, sir.
still needs an editor for the podcast.
We need an editor. I'm not going to add much to that, Andy. Greg nailed it really well. It's overwhelming to me. We end each episode with a phrase that I stole, and I actually mentioned this again this last episode. Harvey Penick was a golf coach in the late part of the 20th century, pretty famous. University of Texas, had some famous alums, made a PGA Tour. He wrote a very popular book, and in it, he dedicated it in the foreword. This book is dedicated to my friends, and if you play golf, you are my friend. So I co-opted that. If you run, you are our friend. If you listen to our podcast, if you're part of the family, I just genuinely mean that. I'm so happy to know you, Andy, and to think that people in the UK, in the Netherlands, in Argentina, in Canada, throughout the US, through non-English speaking countries are listening to us. I sometimes wonder, golly, how did this happen? But it's a genuine labor of love.
So before we sort of move on to the Run Disney side proper, and we'll kind of get into what that means, is obviously there's a video that's about to go out on the channel which explains my experience with Run Disney and a little bit about the sort of what we can expect. I'm really wanting to know, and I think you've kind of covered it in some of your podcasts before, what is your favorite Run Disney event and distance in particular, and why, basically?
I'll start here. Most folks, and I'm one of them tend towards the first runDisney event they did. And mine was the half marathon at Wine and Dine 2016. It was a favorite. I've been back to at least one of the races in every Wine and Dine since. I'll be there in 2 weeks. I can't wait. I've also got to hedge a little bit and say that marathon weekend and accomplishing Dopey is a big deal. And I genuinely look forward to that also. That's a wonderful personal accomplishment. But those are my favorites.
What about yourself, Greg?
For me, I mean, it's like trying to pick your favorite kid or something like that.
We hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, I would say the ultimate is marathon weekend for me, because that weekend, it just has such a different energy to it than compared to any of the other race weekends.
Yeah.
Because it's a combination of the family reunion of senior extended family, but then there's also some pretty serious runners that come down for this race, because it's super flat. It's a Boston qualifier. I mean, Bob and I's coach has qualified several times for the Boston Marathon on the marathon course. Jeff Galloway's son alone ran a sub 3 hour marathon on the Disney course. So
we don't do that. Andy.
Yeah, we don't do that. Correct. So it brings in a lot of different facets of runners, which is just really, really awesome to see. In terms of my favorite races, this is probably a hot take, but I'm probably one of the very few people out there that enjoys doing Goofy more so than Dopey.
That's fine.
I remember when I finished my first Goofy, I was like, well, I should say my only Goofy. I was like, well, what's another 9.3 miles? And I remember at the end of Goofy, I felt super accomplished. But then at the end of Dopey last year, I felt relieved. And oddly enough, I felt more accomplished after Goofy than I did Dopey. And I think it was just like the pure exhaustion of having to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 days in a row, really does wane on you. So, so I would say Goofy is my. I know that's cheating because that's more than one race technically, but you can't beat running down Main Street. In the marathon, the fact that you get all four courses, that's awesome. Now, I will say though, one that is slowly ascending the ranks for me, because I used to be, before for me, it was always marathon weekend and Wine and Dine. Like those were my two. But last year, I just had such like a life-changing experience at Springtime Surprise. Probably, the smallest of the 4 weekends. Obviously, the distances aren't, don't really compare to those of like, your Goofies or your Dopies when you're maxing out at 10 miles and everything like that. So I think it creates this weekend of less pressure and less nerves. And so many people have so much fun during that weekend, and there's some really, really creative themes. So yeah, Springtime, it was one of those things where like when I was looking at the race calendar, I'm like, well, I know I'm doing marathon weekend, but I think I want to go back down in April again, and I'm doing it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I think when you read about Springtime on like Facebook or any message boards, it seems to be the one that doesn't get as much love. I don't know whether it's because it's a 10-miler rather than a half marathon. But yeah, it seems to be the one that seems to fall between the cracks a little bit.
It gets pretty warm that time of year too in Florida. So a lot of times that's pretty hot. And
anything's warm compared to the UK. That's cool. So in terms of the future for Rise and Run, like what are your big hopes and aspirations? I know you kind of said, Greg in particular, that obviously helping people and like just someone kind of hearing stories and it motivating them to do their own run. Is it more of the same? Is there anything, do you have like specific goals that you'd like to hit, while the podcast is going on? What's the future hold?
Again, a good question. We don't have any written goals. We don't have any. We want this many listeners, but no, we're fine. We've grown way beyond our expectations. And we like that. I love the guests that we get. And I'm just hopeful that we can continue to get interesting guests, not only amongst the Rise and Run family. I love having our own personal friends on, but from the running community in general. And I'm hopeful, and I'm reaching out, and I don't want to say anything. I'm reaching out to some names that people would recognize to see if maybe we can start going that way a little bit and getting some guests like that on board. Now, we've had some already, and some will come back, no doubt. We'll hear from Jeff Galloway again, I'm sure, and Chris Twiggs will be back. But yeah, I think for me, that's the direction I'd like to go. So no big changes, just little more nice continued growth and enlarging the family and meeting more people face to face.
Absolutely.
I get so excited.
So obviously we're a couple of weeks away, as you said, from in fact 2 weeks exactly today until the first in the calendar of runDisney. What I'll do is I'll throw up your logo before we move on to runDisney and talk about the events in particular. I'll give you the chance at the end as well. I'd really love to give you the opportunity here to kind of plug where you can find the podcast, what day it comes out, and the Facebook group as well, if you'd like to.
Greg, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. So as Bob likes to famously say, you can find us wherever quality podcasts are sold. So we do have an RSS feed. So, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio app or something like that, Amazon Music, we're on all the services. But I mean, when we look at our statistics, obviously the biggest two players are both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. With the fact that Google Podcasts is going away in 2024, we'll be very interested to see what YouTube has to hold, because they're going to start incorporating podcasts into there as well. So that's where you can find us. Again, whatever podcasting app you use, just search Rise and Run or Rise and Run Podcast. You should be able to find us and find that wonderful logo that we have there. We can also visit us on our website, which is riseandrunpodcast.com. It's got, links to all of the different streaming services, our merchandise shop. We have affiliate links with, different companies like Quine Pizza Apparel. So if you're looking for like race costume shirts, or our friend Pam over at Fluffy Fizzies, if you need that, those race recovery tools, bath bombs, all that kind of jazz.
Or glitter lipstick.
Yes, glitter lipstick. Yeah, Bob and I are big fans of the glitter lipstick. Yeah, and then our Facebook group is Rise and Run Podcast. So again, easy to search that on Facebook. And then on Instagram, you can find us at Rise and Run Pod. Because believe it or not, when we first decided to launch this, there was somebody else out there who just like a week ahead of time took at Rise and Run Podcast. And I don't even know if that podcast is still going on, but that's why we had to get a little creative on the Instagram handle.
I've never found it, Greg. Never did see it. If you search for Rise and Run Podcast, we're the only one that'll come up.
That's great. So if you do go find them now, and you're lucky enough to, in some respects, to have never listened to a podcast, you've got about 100, is it 109 now, 108?
Last night was 108, yeah.
108 episodes that you can go back and listen to.
And new episodes drop every Thursday morning. So that's our release schedule. We might tinker with that in 2024, because we've been putting out a couple of doozies, these last couple of weeks in terms of, 2 hours plus, which is, longer than, some, major motion pictures and stuff like that. Yeah. So, but yeah, as of right now, every Thursday.
But there's a method to that too. And we find that our friends, it's getting to be long run training time. If you're doing the marathon, if you're doing one of the challenges. So it's not unusual. I'll speak for myself. I got 20 miles. I'm going to do it at a training run pace, which for me is pretty slow. So I'm going to be out there 4.5, close to 5 hours. And we find that our friends, we've had no one say to us, I don't listen to your podcast, it's too long. We've had plenty of folks say, boy, I really appreciate the long podcast. You were with me for most of my 17 or whatever miles. We don't know that people listen to all of it. And I don't care. It's there. If you want to, it's there. And one of the things, Greg, I'm coming back. We add at the end a thing we call the race report. We ask our friends who are running, regardless of where it is, over a weekend to put a little story in Facebook. And on Monday and Tuesday, I scour and pick up 2 or 3 sentences from each of them. And we go down those. That thing's grown so much that it now takes us as much as 30 minutes to go through the race report. I don't know if everybody's listening to it, but I know it means a lot to the people who are in there because they tell us that it does. And what really, the PR bell, the PR bell that Greg came up with, which is the monorail chime.
Okay.
If we see people, or whether they make the comment on Facebook or whether they see them live at a local race or at Disney or something, Bob, tell Greg to get the bell ready. Love that. Love it.
And Andrew, the last thing I'll say in terms of where people can find us on the interwebs and such. A couple of months ago, we actually did start a Patreon account. So folks can reach us at patreon.com/Rise and Run Podcast. And we have all sorts of different levels on there of memberships with various benefits and all that jazz. So, if people listen to the podcast, they enjoy it and they want to support, you can visit us over at Patreon as well.
And you can buy merch as well, right? You've got T-shirts.
Yeah, that we do.
Indeed. In fact, they just shipped. Allie's in charge of that. She does a wonderful job. And we pre-order most. We don't keep much inventory. We pre-order most and then fulfill the orders as they come in. So it's about a 1-month lag between the end of the pre-order and the time we get the ship. But they just came in. I think Allie's got most, if not all of them, shipped now. And she did order more, so there is a little bit of inventory on the website.
Well, I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some around on a Wine and Dine weekend. Hopefully there'll be plenty on show.
Yeah.
So today actually was quite a big day for those who are running Wine and Dine because there was a lot of information just dropped. So as I said before, Wine and Dine is the first event in runDisney's calendar. It always comes around sort of beginning of November time, and then there's a little gap until January when we get the marathon weekend. So today, a lot of the information about courses was officially announced by Disney themselves, and sort of runners packs information went out. I'm really intrigued with Wine and Dine coming up in a couple of weeks. What did you make of the routes that have been put out? I know there's a bit of chatter about the sort of long straights where there's nothing going on the half marathon in particular. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions?
I will say, Grant, I am the only member of the Rise and Run team who will not be at Wine and Dine this year. So I'll give my opinion, but it doesn't really matter because I'm not running the course. I will say, this course is nice. I have not run this particular course. I've run a portion of this course because this is a lot of the elements of this course are part of the 10-miler course for Springtime Surprise. Galaxy's Edge, Toy Story Land, all that jazz. I would really like runDisney to go back into the archives a little bit because Wine and Dine used to be the only half marathon where you could run in 3 parks. They used to have a layout where you'd be able to hit Epcot Studios and Animal Kingdom all in one fell swoop. Now, the problem is, in order to be able to do that, I don't think you can start at Epcot. Bob and I's first ever race, we started actually at the ESPN Wide World of Sports.
Right.
And obviously they have not done that since, I think, Star Wars weekends when those first came out. So, but that being said, for this particular course, I think the first half of it is really, really stellar. I mean, the fact that you're getting 3/4 of World Showcase. You're getting the Crescent Lake Resort area with the boardwalk and the beach club and everything like that. And then as I mentioned before, with Hollywood Studios, you're getting Galaxy's Edge, you're getting Toy Story Land. I will say, running through Galaxy's Edge at dawn is pretty cool. So like I said, looking at this map, your first 5.5 miles are really, really stellar.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, you're on the highway a little bit, but I will say when there are those big highway stretches, Run Disney does a really, really good job of getting a lot of character stops out there. So, I mean, I know some people might look at this and groan, for miles, 6 through 11, but hopefully there's a ton of characters out there.
People will groan. People will groan no matter what the course
that's
is.
Exactly true. Yes.
And I think folks would like to run through Magic Kingdom, then enter a wormhole, come out in Animal Kingdom, and then but how are you going to get there? Blasphemy. I don't care that much. I don't. I love running at Disney. We're going to get 2 parks. That's great. I'm there to see my friends, to enjoy the atmosphere. If I could ask Run Disney to do one thing, and if I could ask the guy next door to do one thing, it'd be stop banging, but I can't help it. And Greg alluded to this too. Right now, we start and finish every race in the Epcot parking lot. It wasn't always that way. We started in the Magic Kingdom parking lot sometimes. There have been 5Ks that took place in Animal Kingdom, period. So I'd like to see us get back to that a little bit. But on the whole, in the main, I'm happy. I'm at Disney, I'm running, and I'm good to go.
I've got to say, the only thing I have a grumble about was your off ramps in America are very difficult to run on. It just seems to be like the angle, like
they are. Yeah,
pushing on your ankles and things like that.
They're canted. They are. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, for anyone who isn't knowledgeable at all about Disney, one of the main reasons why you'd want to run around it is you get a chance to run around Disney property when there's no one else in. And also, as Greg said, there's a lot of character stops. So when you see them normally around the park and you've got to wait hours or like a long time to get your photo taken with them, here you probably have to wait like 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on how busy they are.
I was going to say there is a caveat to that, because I remember my first ever Run Disney race. I remember it was more than 10K in, and I saw Darkwing Duck. And I was like, this is my childhood, and I'm going to embrace that. And I waited in a line for a good 20, 25 minutes. So, thankfully I was ahead enough of the pack that I didn't have to worry about the balloon ladies in that instance. But I mean, we have seen some very long character lines.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where the cast members who are the attendants or helping the attendants are really, really good at saying, hey, this is how long we think the line is going to be. And then you can make a judgment call based on where you are in terms of the pack. And, if you are in threat of having to come across the balloon ladies or something like that. So that way you don't get swept off the course or something like that. Because the last thing you want to do is get swept from a Disney race all because you were waiting to see Goofy.
Well, wait a minute now, Goofy.
So yeah, that's a really good point. That for any, again, with Run Disney, they do have to open the parks eventually. So there is a 16-minute mile sort of limit in terms of pacing that they do ask you to adhere to. They have some ladies at the back, which is what Greg referred to there as the balloon ladies. If you want to know more about them, there's a really great interview over on the Rise and Run podcast where they did speak to them. They are not like horrible in any way at all.
Oh, they're the sweetest ladies in the world. They're awesome.
So if you do see them, make sure you say hi. But if you want to know more about what they're about and what we're talking about there, please check out that episode. It's a great episode as well, and dispels a lot of the myths that surround the balloon ladies. As I say, we've got in 2 weeks' time, it would be the Expo for Wine and Dine, followed by the 5K on the Friday, the 10K on the Saturday, and then the half marathon to finish the weekend off on the Sunday. Although, is there a yoga on the Monday as well this year, or is that not a thing for Wine and Dine?
I honestly don't know.
I don't think there's yoga
I don't think there is.
For Wine and Dine. Because I think they make up for that with the post race party after the half marathon.
That's probably it, Greg. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to kind of see what that's all about, there's lots of information over on the runDisney website as well. But Wine and Dine is the first one that's coming up, and I'll be across there for that one. And then the big one that everyone always talks about is the marathon weekend. It's been alluded to a few times here, where there's different challenges, which is the thing that gets people really excited, because on that weekend you can do a 5K, you could do a 10K, you could do a half or the full marathon, or you could do all of them, and that's called the Dopey Challenge. Or you could do what Greg was mentioning about the Goofy Challenge, which is a run and a half, which is the marathon and the half marathon. And there's a lot of extra sort of medals you can get on top of that. And it's just, it seems like a big celebration of running, really.
It is. It's a good way. Well put. Yeah.
So, the big marathon this year, I keep getting confused because it's 2023.
Yeah, we all do that. Yeah.
2023 earlier this year was a big anniversary run as well. So were you guys there for that? How was the big anniversary marathon?
Yes, sir. I was there. I only ran the 5K and the marathon, and in fact, I walked both of them. I've had some. I don't want to go into it much, but I've had some big time leg problems, which I am finally over, thank goodness. But I walked the 5K and the full, and it was great. It was wonderful. It is the largest event of the weekend in terms of number of runners attracted. It had been throttled back some coming out of COVID. I don't know if it was at 100% in 23, but it was large. So we got that. Now, Greg ran Dopey in 23.
That I did. Yeah. In terms of the 30th anniversary, I wouldn't say from special amenities, there wasn't anything super, super special that runDisney did. I mean, probably the biggest thing was, I believe it was at the 30K mark of the marathon. They had a special banner up, and they had a video going. I think they had interviewed a couple of people who were perfect marathoners and the oldest marathoner and stuff like that. So that was neat to see. But I think what probably really consumed that weekend last year was the theme. Because it was the 30th anniversary, they were going with this, early 90s motif. And they really dug into it, in terms of the music that they played on the course. There was a lot of Boys to Men and everything like that. And, lots of bright fluorescent colors, if you were into the, Trapper Keeper back in the day, when you were at school, all those crazy designs and wild colors and stuff like that. So they really, really leaned into that. So I would say that was probably the biggest thing that made this past January special.
And how did it feel? I know you said earlier it was a relief more than anything, but a couple of days on, how did it feel to complete the Dopey Challenge?
I mean, when I look back on it, I am very, very proud of myself. And, it was, again, the most amount of miles that I've done in a certain span in my life. But the thing that I think mentally can eat away at you during the Dopey Challenge, as I mentioned before, it's always the waking up. The fact that in my situation, and granted, this doesn't apply to everybody, but I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with my family. It'd be one of those things where, okay, I get up, I don't see them. They're already in the parks by the time I'm back at the hotel. I need to recover. I get to see them for maybe 3 to 4 hours. We have a meal together, and then I'm like, okay, I gotta go lay in my bed so I can wake up and do this all over again. So, but granted, being a Dopey finisher, it is something I'm so glad that I was able to do it, and and to have all those memories. But I think for me, I think why Goofy will always hold a special place in my heart is the fact that I ran my first ever marathon, something that I thought I could never do in my life. I did it at the most special place in the world, a place that truly means more to me than a lot of other places, around the globe and everything like that. So, but yeah, so even though I was relieved to finish, I'm still very proud of the accomplishments that I made.
And I used to think that Dopey was impossible. I would talk to friends, how can you do that? Until I learned it wasn't. So I did my first one in 2019, and it was not my first marathon. I had actually done a marathon prior in 1988. So my next one was in 2019. Many people finish that marathon and they go, that's it, I'm never doing this again. I finished Dopey, saw my wife coming out of the chute, gave her a hug and said, that's the greatest thing ever. I can't wait to do it next year. And I did it in 19, I did it in 20, I did it in 21, had a little trouble, but I made it. We lost 22 to the pandemic. And then by 23, I'd had a couple surgeries on my legs, and I did try to sign up for it, but I got shut out. And in hindsight, I realized pretty quickly I was fortunate to get, because I wasn't ready and I couldn't have gone through the training. Now this year, training's on course. It's going to be slow, but training's on course, and I'm optimistic. So this will be number 4.
And what's also really special at least particularly for Bob and I, as it relates to Marathon Weekend, and I love mentioning this group. Both Bob and I are running Marathon Weekend on behalf of a charity called Give Kids the World. It's a wonderful organization over in Kissimmee that works with like the Make-A-Wish program and everything like that, where children who are dealing with terminally ill syndromes or cancers or whatever, they have an opportunity to come down to the greater Orlando area and have a week-long vacation where they don't need to worry about hospital visits and medications and everything like that. They celebrate all the holidays every single week. There's wonderful accommodations that they get to stay in. They have theme parties, pool, free snacks, free meals, and then they get to go to the parks at no cost whatsoever. Yeah. So it's a huge honor for both Bob and I to be to be able to support Give Kids the World during Marathon Weekend. So again, another reason why this holds such a special place in our hearts.
A quick asterisk here. I agree. Not all the kids are terminal, but they're all suffering from some serious illness that's affecting them and their family long term.
It sounds like a great cause to be running for. And if it's anything like some of the runs across in the UK, there'll be hundreds of people, if not thousands of people running for charities as well. So it's always great events to raise money for good causes as well.
Most definitely.
We've got a couple more events that round off the season. I know it says virtual on there. There is the opportunity to do all of these events virtually as well. So you've got the chance, if you can't make it across to Orlando, unfortunately it's not outside North America. You can't do them in the UK, so I hope that's something they work on for the future. But I presume the reason is because the medals and the t-shirts that they do are quite substantial, so it'll be a lot of shipping costs involved. And maybe one day the Paris run will come back as well.
That would be great. Yeah, I think it will. We run into that ourselves, Andy, with our merchandise. It's not cost effective to ship it overseas. It's extremely expensive.
Yeah, it does seem to be the way. Like you see something, oh, that's a really cool running thing I could buy for the American site, and then it costs you more in shipping to actually buy the actual product itself, which is always a bit of a shame. But
it is. I agree.
Yeah, for now, the virtual ones are for anyone in America, but it's really cool. Opportunity if you're in on the West Coast and you fancy doing the Princess Run, but you can't make it across to Orlando, then you can sign up that way. But we'll talk about, there is an opportunity for people on the West Coast coming up soon as well. You've got the Springtime Surprise, which we covered off, which is slightly different. We've got the 10 miler in there instead of the half marathon. Always like kind of different themes as well for the Springtime Surprise rather than the set ones that they have for everything else.
Yeah.
And then just really quickly, this year, or the coming calendar year, I guess, we are going to see the return of a Disneyland weekend as well. How excited are you and the community about this return for California to have another Disney event?
Well, I think we're both excited, and I know the community is excited. and neither Greg nor I are going. Not this year anyway. I really hope to go next year. I really do. I'm going to put that on my calendar. I want to do it next year. I'm doing every weekend and every run at Disney World this year. I figure that's enough. I may back off that a little bit next year and sneak Disneyland in instead.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I look at it where, my wife and daughter, and I'll be great myself too, are itching to get back to Disneyland. I have not been since I was in high school, so I just want to be able to see it and to experience it again and get my bearings, and then mix a Run Disney race into it. But now the thing that I'll be very interested to see, and this is potentially, we'll get this information in a couple of weeks, is usually at Wine and Dine is when they release the race calendar for the upcoming season. So even though the Disneyland race will have not gone off when we get those dates, I'll be really interested to see if they throw more race weekends into Disneyland. Because, back before, the Disneyland races fizzled, I want to say that was in, I don't know if it was 2017 or something like that.
Yeah, it was prior to the pandemic.
Yeah. There used to be 4 race weekends in Disneyland,
Right.
as well. So obviously, you need to be able to walk before you can run. So obviously, Disneyland 2024 is their quote unquote walking attempt here. But I hope it goes very well, and I hope they expand it.
Oh yeah, I had to chuckle again when Greg says he hasn't been since high school. I haven't been since before Greg was born. I was to Disneyland once, 1976.
Oh, I got the opportunity to go this year in April for the first time ever to Disneyland. So it's amazing for anyone who has been maybe to the Florida or to Paris, but not to California. I thought the difference between them is so marked, and it's very difficult to explain because there's a lot of the same, but there's just a feel that's like completely different. So it's very interesting. So I think everyone who's got the chance to do both, and obviously they'll get the coast to coast challenge as well. That'll be a fantastic experience for anyone who's getting the chance to go across. One thing I'd love to, before we just start wrapping up, to ask you both is, in your opinion, why are Disney Run Disney events so special, and why do they hold a place in your hearts as something different from other events you could do at any other weekend?
Fair question, and the answer is it's the people, it's the friends. I do a lot of other events. They're wonderful. I've done them throughout mostly the eastern half of the U.S. and they're fun. But I go, and with some exceptions, I go, I finish, I come home. I go to Disney, as I've said many times, I go to the Disney runs as much to visit with my friends as I do to do the runs. And it's that community that's built not just through Rise and Run podcast, but through Run Disney, that I hope to be doing it for a long time, my friend.
That's good to hear. What about yourself, Greg?
I think what makes Run Disney such a special and unique organization is that it is the perfect entry level and community for someone who wants to get into this sport.
Good point.
Obviously, you have the one exception, which is, you have Disney, Disney World races or Run Disney races where, you must maintain a pace of 16 minutes per mile. Whether you're doing Couch to 5K or you've ran the Boston Marathon, that is a race that it can be achievable for you. As long as, and Bob says this and the rest of us say it on the podcast all the time, as long as you are willing to put in the work and willing to put in the training, you can do this. And the training is the tough part. It's the races that are your awesome victory lap, even though it is the quote unquote race. But what I appreciate about Run Disney is that it recognizes and supports runners of all ages, ability types, shapes, and sizes. And it doesn't matter because we're all winners, because we all get that medal. I mean, one of the people that we have become friends with and we truly do embrace, especially his message, is a gentleman by the name of Martinez Evans. He goes by on Instagram 300 pounds and running. The guy, I mean, Grant, I am a obese runner myself, and when I had the chance to speak with him on the podcast, he made me feel so self-assured that even in my body type, I am a runner, and to have that confidence boost, it is really, really impactful. And runDisney embraces that on an every single race basis. So, and the fact that there, regardless of whatever type of runner you are, that there are, the volunteers, the cast members, the spectators are out to support. I mean, the fact that there are so many people who hang around the finish line at the end of any runDisney race to watch the final person cross the finish line. Because guess what? The winner, sure, they break the tape and confetti goes off. But when the last person crosses, guess what? That confetti cannon also goes off for that last person as well, too. And I guarantee you there are not a lot of races on this globe where that happens, where back in the Packers like myself, if we're struggling, we're having a bad day, by the time we're, crossing that finish line, maybe they're starting to take down the finish line.
Exactly.
Maybe they're packing up the snacks and the water table and everything like that. You're never going to see that at runDisney.
Right.
And the fact that they embrace everyone and they make it accessible for everyone, especially even through their partnership with Jeff Galloway. Yeah, sure. People might use Couch to 5K, but the fact that runDisney has relied so heavily and promoted the run, walk, run method, that's what makes this achievable for so many people. And the fact that that's celebrated, I think, is awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated every time that you kind of talk about the Jeff Galloway method. And if you want to learn more, the guys and girls over on Rise and Run and talk about it every week, pretty much. And you can find out a lot of more information over on the runDisney website. They have guides on there as well where you can find them. There's in the Facebook group for Rise and Run, there's always the weekly, this is what you could be doing or should be doing if you stick to that plan. So there's plenty of information out there. I'm so glad that you guys have been able to join me. And that message in particular, Greg, really resonates with myself. The reason why I started this channel was because I'm a normal bloke. I'm a heavier bloke than most. And I just like to kind of, similar to yourself, if I can inspire even one person to do it for themselves, then that's all I can ever ask for. And the fact that Disney kind of embraces that, and I can say from my own experience, they truly do. You see all people of every background, gender, etc., running, and it's fantastic to see as well. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. But as I said, it's been an absolute pleasure spending the last 50 odd minutes with you guys. I'm really excited to meet you. In weeks. I know Greg said you're not going to be there, so hopefully I'll see you again in the future, a future event. I am coming across it as well for Princess Weekend. And then hopefully, and I haven't announced it or it's not gone on sale yet, I've got everything crossed that I will be doing my first marathon and dopey in 2025. Awesome. So hopefully I'll see you or speak to you before then. But once again, thank you very much. And I'll give you one last chance just to plug the podcast and anything else that you want to talk about. If you just tell us one more time, where can we find you and any of the information about the Facebook group as well?
Rise and Run podcast releases early in the U.S. every Thursday morning. We release weekly. You can find us wherever finer podcasts are sold. Spotify, Apple. If there's a podcast distributor, we are on it. Join us at the Facebook group, Rise and Run Podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Rise and Run Pod. Does it sound like I do this? I do it at the beginning of every episode, so I pretty much got it down. Or give us no, I'm not going to. I'll give you the phone number. If we have a phone number that you can call and leave us a message.
Or if you want to order a pizza, that's well.
Yeah, 727-266-2344. give us a call. Leave us a intro or a message or a race report. And just have fun, by golly, because that's what we do. We enjoy the heck out of this.
Well, thank you once again. And that's a big thank you to Bob and Greg from the Rise and Run podcast. I'm sure we will speak to you again very soon. But until then, have safe runs and we'll see you again real soon.